Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for coming this evening. The Kenan Institute for Ethics is really thrilled to bits to be welcoming Ken Feinberg here for our annual Distinguished Lecture. The title of his talk is What is Life Worth? The Ethical Challenges of Catastrophe Response. Every year, this lecture brings together academics, advocates, artists, and activists to campus to discuss issues of broad ethical significance. And I can't imagine a more appropriate or timely discussion. The idea for this lecture actually bubbled up a couple of years ago at a Kenan Advisory Board dinner. And we are so very, very grateful for Perkins Professor of Law and Kenan Senior Fellow Jonathan Weiner here at Duke for making this happen. And before I turn it over to Jonathan to introduce his long-term mentor and colleague, I want to acknowledge a couple of individuals. First, Tom Kenan and Dan Drake at the Kenan Fund for their ongoing support of the Institute. It is their generosity that makes tonight possible for all of us. Thank you. I also want to offer a very special welcome to the Duke Engage National Advisory Board and their chairs, Mark and Benet Todzo, for whom this lecture is kicking off their fall board meeting. And finally, a very, very special thanks to Manda Hufstedler, who's hiding in the back, who has managed this visit with grace and alacrity. She, along with the rest of the brilliant Kenan Duke Engage team, under the deft leadership of Ada Gregory and Inga Peterson, makes every day fun, meaningful, and an impactful adventure. Thanks to you all.
Thank you so much, Suzanne and the Kenan Institute and the whole family of Kenan families and supporters of the Kenan Institute for Ethics at Duke University. It's really a pleasure to be part of this community and to enjoy the stimulating and provocative interactions and engagements that we have so much like this event tonight. It's really my great pleasure to introduce Ken Feinberg to be our honored speaker this evening. Ken, after law school at NYU, served as special counsel for the U.S. Senate Committee on the Judiciary from 1975 to 1980, and then as chief of staff to Senator Edward M. Kennedy from 1978 to 1980. And then he really engaged in and created a remarkable career, really a kind of role in society that did not exist before Ken took it on, helping to resolve some of the largest, most complex, and most anguished legal cases in American history. And through that work, he's become a true pioneer in designing compensation systems for cases of unprecedented trauma. And I proposed to Ken that I was going to name all of them, and Ken said to me, no, keep it short. So this is just a partial sampling, but those include the massive Agent Orange litigation in the 1980s, and I should say that that's where I first met Ken when I was young, right out of law school, clerking for a magnificent judge, Jack Weinstein, who was handling the Agent Orange cases, and Ken Feinberg was the special master in charge of designing the compensation system and settling those cases, a really enormous undertaking. And after Agent Orange, among the many other cases on which Ken has played the key role in resolving, settling, compensating, administering, include the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund, the Virginia Tech Shooting Fund, the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill resolution, the One Fund Boston after the Boston Marathon bombings, the Newtown Sandy Hook Community Foundation after the shootings at that school, the General Motors ignition switch cases, and many, many, many others. His books include succinctly titled Who Gets What? And What is Life Worth? And the book, What is Life Worth, as Ken may tell us more, is now being made into a movie, which will come out next spring, starring Michael Keaton as Ken. So here you will be able to say you saw the real thing first. So it's really my enormous pleasure to welcome Ken Feinberg to talk with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Jonathan, and Suzanne also. It is a very, very great honor for me to be not only delivering this annual lecture, but to have in the room not only my dear friend Jonathan, who's, of course, a distinguished, nationally recognized professor at Duke Law School, but to have Tom Kenan himself and Dan Drake here to listen to these words is a very, very special honor. And I must say at the outset, talk about the relevance today of the Kenan Institute for Ethics. My goodness. It's almost been, as I understand it, 25 years that there has been a Kenan Institute for Ethics here at Duke. But I'm willing to bet that there's never been a more opportune time for policymakers and academicians and students and the public to be focusing today on the ethical implications of public policy. It's never quite been like it is today, and I think that the Kenan Institute for Ethics and organizations like the Kenan Institute focusing on what's the right way to go and the right thing to do, and taking on some of these ethical issues. It's a public service, and I'm so grateful that I've been asked to come today and visit from Washington, from the swamp, to have a chance to engage everybody, speak for a few minutes, invite questions, and maybe I'll meet some of you afterward at the reception or at the dinner. Now, the title, of course, The Ethical Challenges of Catastrophic Response. You could spend a seminar discussing the ethical implications of what I do. And I'm just going to give you some both magna and minna approaches to the problem. That is, some of the overriding ethical issues that come up when you're talking about catastrophes in the United States. And then also some of the ethical dilemmas that I confront in dealing with individual victims, not just the ethical implications of the policy as a whole, but how it impacts individuals distraught, angry, frustrated with life's unfairness. And in every one of these programs, 9/11, Agent Orange, the Boston Marathon bombings, the BP oil spill, you cannot take on one of these assignments without studying and trying to articulate how to respond to some of these issues. And I'll give you specific examples, and you'll understand exactly what is going on in my mind. When you're tapped by a president of the United States, or an attorney general, or a governor, or a mayor, or the Congress, to design, implement, and administer these programs. Now, some first principles. I don't decide whether or not there ought to be special compensation for victims. That's not my role. I don't claim to be Solomon, making decisions on whether and to what extent and when we should create a 9/11 fund or a BP oil spill fund, or a Boston Marathon bombing fund, or a Virginia Tech shooting fund, or a Pulse nightclub terrorist attack fund in Orlando, Florida that killed 50 people. I don't make those decisions. Those decisions are made by others. Presidents, governors, mayors. They decide we want to do something special for a certain segment of victims in this country. And as our duly elected representatives, representing all of you and everybody else, they decide we ought to set up a fund that is uniquely limited to certain victims. That's their decision. Sometimes the American people as a whole decide they want a fund. After the Boston Marathon bombings or the 9/11 terrorist attacks, unsolicited millions of Americans sat down, wrote out a check, paid in the order of the victims, and sent it to the Treasury, or sent it to the mayor of Boston after the Boston Marathon bombings, or sent it to a special fund created by somebody. There's no solicitation necessary. Sometimes people watch CNN or MSNBC or Fox News. They see what happens, and they immediately sympathize, empathize with the victims. One thing I've learned among many lessons about these programs: never, ever underestimate the charitable impulse of the American people. It is astounding to me how the American people, despite the tribalism, red state, blue state, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. After certain tragedies, the American people as one respond, apolitical, to a horrible tragedy. But that begs the question, you see, about the ethical implications of some of these programs. 13 days after 9/11, Congress passed a law signed by President Bush. And the law simply said anybody who would rather come to a special taxpayer public-funded program administered by Ken Feinberg, anybody who would voluntarily rather do that than file a lawsuit against the airlines, the World Trade Center, the security guard companies, Massport, Boeing, the airlines, anybody who wants to forget all of that and instead come into a no-fault, quick, certain program funded by the taxpayer can do so. You don't have to. You can opt out and do your thing. But if you'd rather come into a fund, which we have established by law, Feinberg will evaluate your claim and within 60 days, if you're eligible, pay you. In return, you will sign a document. I will not sue any of these alleged negligent parties. Your choice, up to you. Well, everybody came into the fund. 97% of the families that lost a loved one on the airplanes, the World Trade Center, or the Pentagon voluntarily opted into the program. And over a 33-month period established by law, I distributed $7.1 billion of taxpayer money to secure a non-litigation alternative for about 5,300 dead and physically injured victims of the 9/11 attacks. The program was, by any statistical measure, a tremendous success. And Congress achieved its objective in enacting the law. We want to try and help people avoid litigation by accepting the money, the very generous money, offered by the administrator, Ken Feinberg. The average award for a death claim in the 9/11 fund was tax-free $2 million. The average award for a physical injury claim in 9/11, tax-free, $400,000. 5,300 people dead, physically injured. The families of the dead or physically injured survivors came into the program. I think that the 9/11 fund was absolutely the right thing to do. To me, it exhibited the highest qualities of the American people and their elected representatives. I have spent the last 20 years almost reiterating my view that the program was a success and it was sound public policy. But I must say it is a very close question. It is a very, very close question. And you talk about the ethical implications of tragedy. I think it was the right thing to do by a hairbreadth of argument. You should have read some of the letters I got during my administration of the 9/11 fund. Dear Mr. Feinberg, my daughter died in the basement of the World Trade Center in the original 1993 attacks committed by the very same type of people. Why aren't I eligible? Dear Mr. Feinberg, I don't get it. My son died in Oklahoma City when a domestic terrorist attacked that building, blew it up, 180 people died, including my son. Where's my check? Not just terrorism, you see. Not just terrorism. Dear Mr. Feinberg, last year my wife saved 3 little girls from drowning in the Mississippi River. And then she drowned a heroine. Where is my check? You better be careful in creating a special generous compensation program just for the select few. Everybody else, fend for yourself. You hire your lawyer, judge and jury will decide. The idea that you are going to create generous compensation for a very few innocent victims, be careful. Bad things happen to good people every day in this country. Ethics? I didn't see any compensation fund for the 1,000 people who died after Hurricane Katrina. In New Orleans, 1,000 people died in that flood. There was no 9/11 fund. I didn't see any 9/11 fund for the Boston Marathon bombings or the Pulse terrorist attack or the Harvest concert attack in Las Vegas. I didn't see any special law enacted by Congress. The 9/11 fund, ethically, sound public policy, the right thing to do. Don't ever do it again. Don't ever do that again. In America, where we so strongly believe in individual self-reliance, buy life insurance, hedge against the future. The idea that we're going to set up a special program just for certain victims when other innocents are just as worthy. You see, from the perspective of the American people, not from the perspective of the victims, I think the 9/11 fund can be justified. The American people, as a country, wanted to do something. Worst attack. Look, the 9/11 fund, the 9/11 attacks stand apart, I think, from any other American historical tragedy except the American Civil War, Pearl Harbor, and the assassination of President Kennedy. That's about it. And the 9/11 fund. So if you want to create a program and sort of do an end run around the ethical implications of singling out special people for special compensation, well, do it once and then put the file away. And the 9/11 fund should better be studied in an American history class or in a divinity school class than in a loss class. I think the 9/11 fund, for the reasons stated, is a precedent for nothing. It's a one-off response to an American tragedy, and leave it at that. Now, even if you get around the ethical conundrum of justifying such a program, you still have to deal with the individual claims that come up, you see. People ask me all the time, what was the most difficult part of any of these programs, 9/11, the Boston Marathon, the Virginia Tech shootings? What's the most difficult? Is the most difficult part crafting a eligibility criteria or a methodology for calculating damages? Or is the toughest part actually calculating what an individual should receive in the way of compensation? No. Those aspects of these assignments are not particularly challenging. They aren't. These programs, once you decide to create them, they are not rocket science. There are people in this room, maybe with a little help from the Kenan Institute, but there are people in this room perfectly capable of doing the mechanics of these funds. The tough part, the debilitating part that you never get over, the ethical issues that are posed when you're dealing with the emotion of victims or families of victims. My law degree, when it comes to that, a wash. Better a divinity degree or a degree in psychiatry, because you are dealing one-on-one with individuals who come to see you and pose ethical, practical dilemmas. It is debilitating. So when I take on a 9/11 or a Boston Marathon or any one of these funds, brace yourself. Brace yourself in advance on what you're going to hear, because it is devastating when you meet individuals who want to voluntarily come and see you. A 24-year-old woman, Jonathan has heard these stories so many times, he's written the script for the movie, I think. A 24-year-old woman comes to see me in private. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my husband. He was a fireman at the World Trade Center. And he left me with our two children, 6 and 4. Now, you've told me I'm going to get an award of $2.4 million tax-free. I want it in 30 days. Mrs. Jones, we have a procedure for all victims and their families. Consistency is important. We have to follow our process. We can't be favoring one victim over another, one applicant, one claimant over another. We just can't. Don't worry. You'll be getting your money probably under our procedures. It's got to go down to the Treasury. It's public money. They've got to process the claim down to Treasury. You'll be getting your money 60, at the most 90 days. You're not listening, Mr. Feinberg. I want it in 30 days. Mrs. Jones, why do you need the money with such haste? You'll get the money. It may take longer than 30 days. No. You want to know, Mr. Feinberg? I'm going to tell you why. I have terminal cancer. I have 10 weeks to live. My husband was going to survive me and take care of our 2 little ones. Now they're going to be orphans. I have got to now get this money, set up a trust, find a guardian while I still have my faculties. I'm not going to be around here very much longer. Help! The hell with the procedures. We ran down to Treasury. We processed the compensation as fast as we could. 8 weeks later, she died. Now, you talk about unethical. I mean, we've got a procedure. One person shouldn't get a break over another. Spammy. This woman comes to us. What's the ethical thing to do? What's the right thing to do? Asterisk. Special case. That's what we did. That's what we did. A lady comes to see me. 24 years old. I thought she was going to collapse in my office. She was so distraught. Tears. Gasping for breath. Mr. Feinberg. I lost my husband at the World Trade Center. He was a fireman. And he left me with our 3 children, 6, 4, and 2. My husband was Mr. Mom. Every day that he wasn't at the firehouse on duty, he was home teaching our 6-year-old how to play baseball, teaching our 4-year-old how to read, reading a bedtime story to the 2-year-old. What a cook Mr. Mom was. He cooked all our meals. What a gardener around the house on weekends, planting the flowers and the bushes and mowing the lawn. Mr. Feinberg, Mr. Mom was my life. The only reason I haven't gone up to the roof of our home and jumped to join him, our 3 children. You're giving me $3 million, I don't care. Bring him back. Keep the $3 million. Bring my husband, Mr. Mom, back. Mrs. Jones, I wish I could do that. I don't have that power. This is all I can do. I'm sorry. She leaves. The next day, I get a telephone call from a lawyer in Queens. Mr. Feinberg, did you meet yesterday with Mrs. Jones with the 3 kids, 6, 4, and 2, and Mr. Mom? Yes. Horrible. Now, Mr. Feinberg, let me tell you something on the telephone. I don't envy what you have to do. I couldn't do it. What you have to do is next to impossible. I don't know how you get through the day. But I got to tell you something. She doesn't know that Mr. Mom has 2 other kids by his girlfriend in Queens, 5 and 3, and was living a double life. And I represent the girlfriend. And when you cut your check from the 9/11 fund, there's not 3 surviving children, there's 5 surviving children. But I'm sure you'll do the right thing. Click, he hangs up. Ethics, practicality, the right thing to do. Do you tell her? Do you tell her about the double life and the 2 kids and the mistress? Or do you keep your mouth shut and figure out a creative solution? No law school, frankly, no Kenan Institute is going to help you on this. What's the right thing to do? Better a divinity degree, I must say. Well, we went around and around on this for a couple of weeks with the staff. And then one night at 3 a.m., I get up, and my wife, "What are you doing up at 3 a.m.? What's the problem?" "Well, this woman, and there's Mr. Mom, and there's 2 kids, and the mistress. What do you..." "Don't you dare tell her!" Well, that solved that problem. That was a solution. That was an ethical resolution of that issue. We cut 1 check to the grieving widow and her 3 children, and without her knowledge, we did a separate calculation and cut a check to the girlfriend as the guardian of the 2 children. And that was it. Now, that was almost 20 years ago. I will bet you anything they know each other and it's all now out. I don't know. Not my place. Not my place. But you cannot engage in these types of programs without confronting the very issues that are the mission of the Kenan Institute, the mission of tying ethics to public policy. It is so important. And the whole issue of empathy comes into play, you see. It's a fascinating thing to tell you. Most of you probably know this. I learned it about empathy. In all of these programs, when people come to see me privately, they rarely want to talk about money. That's not why they want to see me. They want to see me for 2 reasons, both very valid. First, they want to vent about life's unfairness. Mr. Feinberg, my daughter was driving a GM automobile. When the ignition switch failed, she lost control of the automobile and was killed when the automobile hit a tree. Let me tell you something. I don't want to just punish GM. I want you to know there is no God. No God would ever allow something like this to happen to my daughter. I just want you to know I'll never step foot in a church again. Don't tell me that my daughter's an innocent victim of circumstance and fatalism and all of this. She's gone. And I'm throwing away any vestige of religion in my house. Or people come to see me to validate the memory of a lost loved one. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my wife at the World Trade Center. We were married for 25 years. And I appreciate this hearing in private because I want to show you a video of our wedding 25 years ago. Mr. Jones, you can do that, but you don't have to because it'll have no bearing on compensation. You're going to watch. I want you to see what those murderers did to my angel. Here's the video. Show the video. Some people came and said, Mr. Feinberg, I just want you to listen to my husband's screams. He called me, and I've kept the voicemail, the voice message, on the phone. I want you to hear what my husband went through in his last few minutes of life. Mrs. Jones, you don't have to play that. It'll be very much, just sit there. You're going to listen. You hear the screaming and the saying goodbye. Ethics? I mean, the ethical dilemmas lie at the base of these programs. You can't avoid them. You can't. And your ability to express empathy. I've learned a valuable lesson over the years about empathy. The less you say, the better. Be careful in your desire to empathize with victims. Be careful about trying to express that empathy. Overwhelmingly, it doesn't work. Not with these vulnerable people. I'll never forget, I make mistakes every one of these programs. I constantly correct myself in trying to deal with people. I remember after 9/11, an 82-year-old man came to see me, tears streaming down his face. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my son at the Pentagon. When the plane hit, he escaped. He was safe. He thought his sister, who also worked at the Pentagon, he thought she was in jeopardy. He ran back into the burning building to look for his sister. She had already escaped through a side door. She was safe. He died looking for her. Mr. Feinberg, my life is over. I'm an old man. No father should ever have to bury a son. I just want you to know that. Well, I looked at this man in my immature early youth, and without even really thinking it through, I said to him, Mr. Jones, this is terrible, what happened to your son. I know how you feel. Whoa. This guy put a hand on my shoulder. Mr. Feinberg, I want to give you some friendly advice. You have a very difficult assignment. I know that. Don't ever tell somebody like me that you know how I feel. You have no idea how I feel. It sounds hollow. It's pretentious. It's meaningless. A word to the wise. You have a tough job, but I just want to give you some. Well, I'll never do that again. Better to just listen. And just brace yourself for what you're going to hear. After the Boston Marathon bombings on Patriots' Day 4 or 5 years ago, I get a call from one of the injured victims. Mr. Feinberg, I've read about your fund, and I'd like to come and see you, but I'm still in rehabilitation at the Spaulding Rehab Hospital in Boston. I said, oh, Mr. Jones, that's okay. I'll get in a taxi, and I'll come over to you. And I went over there. I walk into his hospital room, and there he is in his bed with a stump. He lost his left leg at the hip. And he's lying in bed with his 9-year-old kid on his lap. And sitting around are his mother, his brother, and a friend. And I said to him, Mr. Jones, this is terrible. I'm here to let you know that I am bringing you a check for $1,250,000 from One Fund Boston for the loss of your leg. He looks at me. I got a better idea. You keep the damn money. Give me my leg back. How's that? Give me the leg back. I don't want the money. I want my leg. Mr. Jones, I wish I could do that. I haven't got that power. Yeah, great. Well, I hightailed it out of there as fast as I could. There's nothing you can say. What are you going to say? These public policy and ethical issues, large, overriding, and individual one by one, are constantly on your mind when you design the program, when you implement it. And some of the public policy issues about these programs are tied into the character of the country and the ethical beliefs of the country. Mr. Feinberg, you're administering this 9/11 fund. And by all accounts, it's working wonderful. You're getting all this money out, and all these people are getting paid. But I got to tell you, do you think it's right that the Congress delegates to one person all of this power? You decide how to design the program. You decide how to implement the program. You decide who should get what. There are no appeals. There are no committees. There are no checks and balances. It's whatever you decide. That is not America, Mr. Feinberg. I don't care how well it's working. The idea that we are going to delegate to one person. We are not Rome. We are not Athens and Greece. The idea that we're giving you all of this power over the American public's taxpayer money, and that you're deciding on your own what everybody should get. With all due respect to your success, I think this is a terrible idea. It is ethically and practically unsound. And I just want you to know that. I hear that a lot. And there's an awful lot of truth to that. An awful lot of truth to that. Fortunately, these programs that Jonathan mentions and others are exceedingly rare. You know, the way we resolve disputes in this country is not by creating a 9/11 fund or a BP oil spill fund or anything like that. The way we resolve disputes in this country, you hire your lawyer, I'll hire my lawyer. Adversary system, judge and jury. That's the way it is. That's the way it is in Durham. That's the way it is in Brockton, Massachusetts, or in Los Angeles, or in Houston, or in Montana, or anywhere else in the United States. That's the normal way that we implement equal protection under law. That's the way it's supposed to work. That's the way lawyers are trained to make it work. I have very little sympathy to people who criticize lawyers in this country. Like any profession, I mean, there are problems, but I mean, the American legal system is so ingrained in the history and fabric of our country, it's not going to change. It really isn't. Nothing I do with these programs is going to change that. These are all aberrations. And I must say that one answer I have to those who say it is unethical and unfair to allow a 9/11 fund or a BP oil spill fund or a General Motors fund to be implemented. It's unfair to everybody else. My answer in part is, calm down. 3 in 20 years, they're so rare. Don't worry about it. These are aberrations. They're not going to change the fabric of the country in terms of how we resolve disputes. They're not. So that's sort of the message today for this Kenan Institute lecture. I do have 2 final points I want to make, each 1 minute. When Jonathan and Susanna say 6 o'clock, it's 6 o'clock. 2 final points. I take tremendous pride in being invited here today on behalf of the Kenan Institute series, for the reasons I've said. People say to me, what in your background prepared you for these assignments? What did you learn growing up in Brockton, Massachusetts, that sort of provided the seed for you to be ready to take on these tough assignments? And I tell people that I was influenced as a teenager and remain influenced to this day by the message of President John F. Kennedy, a son of Massachusetts. And I remember when he was president, it is so contrary to what we hear today, but it had a profound impact on me. He always emphasized 3 principles that have guided me ever since. 1, he said over and over again, government is not a dirty word. We need good, sound, ethical government. 2, serving the public interest is a noble undertaking. And 3, and most important, he said, every single individual can make a difference. I yearn to hear anybody today talk about anything like that instead of me, 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 me. How I believe personally we miss that reaffirmation of what individuals acting in the public interest with ethical considerations in mind can do for our community, and the communitarian ethic, community-wide ethic. That's the uplifting 1 minute. Now, we might as well close with a little bit of humor. During the 9/11 Fund, I'm asked, what's the strangest meeting that you ever had with a claimant? And I say without fear of contradiction, I remember one claim I will never forget. A woman came to see me, not crying, rather well made up, dressed to the nines. She came in to see me. She said, Mr. Feinberg, I'm glad that you've given me this opportunity to have a hearing. I just want to make sure of one thing. If I tell you something, might you reduce the amount of the award that I've been given? Reduce, diminish it? No. I said, sometimes we increase the award based on a personal plea, but no, I would never reduce your award. You can tell me anything you want. She says, good, because I do want to tell you something and get it off my chest. My husband died in the World Trade Center. He was scum. He sexually abused me for years. He's worth more to me dead than he ever was alive. I am so glad he's finally got what was coming to him. And I am going to enjoy this money as battle pay. And I want you to know I'm leaving here and I'm going to go on a shopping spree and I'm going to take a trip. And I am so glad that there is still justice in this world. And I'm there, you know. I never heard anything quite like that one. But that's the one I'll always remember as somebody who bared their soul to me in a way that was sort of uplifting, actually. I mean, so again, I want to thank Tom, and I want to thank the Institute. I want to thank Duke, and Susanna, and of course Jonathan, my dear friend. And I've been told gladly that we should devote a few minutes at least to questions from the audience, and so I throw it open at this time. Thank you.
You've been witness to a great deal of suffering and certainly taken on an extraordinary amount of responsibility in your life. My question is, when it comes to your personal feelings, how do you remain hopeful and how do you remain positive and truly have faith in the work that you're doing within the world?
That's, the question of how I cope. Well, you cope to a certain extent. It is debilitating, and you don't sleep. I think there are a couple of reasons. I'm asked this quite often. First, you better have a very, very loving family that rallies around you and supports your work and is there to commiserate with you on these. Second, I must say it sure helps when these programs are apolitical. They're not Republican or Democrat, liberal, conservative, red state, blue state. Up to now, at least, everybody rallies around me, the public. That is a tremendous salve to help, knowing that the American people as a whole, despite some outliers and some critics, of course, but as a whole, very, very supportive. And I think that's important. I also have personally, my friend Bruce Eisen's here, he knows this, but personally, what you find for me is during the evening, after you've been dealing with the lows of civilization, horror, at night, the height of civilization, opera, Beethoven, Mahler, classical music, chamber works, big help. For one thing, you sleep a little bit at night, listen to the opera. You get some rest. But it's a big help to me. I found that was a lifeline also. And if the American people are asking you to do this, soldiers are dying every day around the world. And what are you going to say to President Obama? I'm busy. Or President Bush, I can't do it? You can't do that. So, you find ways during these hearings, the 9/11 hearings that I've talked about, if I did 4 or 5 of them right after another, I would stop, take a break, go outside, walk around the block, see little kids playing in a playground, buy an ice cream cone, try and balance a little bit the horror of the moment. And you manage to get through it because you feel that there are an awful lot of people depending on you. And you may be crying in private, but your public persona and your ability to do the job is paramount. I'm asked, if people come to see you, do you tend to give them more money after you hear their story? Yeah. Unless you have a heart of stone, I'd like to see you not do that. You do the best you can. Yes, sir.
Thank you. You talked before about the charitable spirit of the American people and those sorts of great traits in our country. Just to ask about the other side of the coin, how much of a problem do you have with fraud in the claims that you administer?
Very little. How much problem is there fraud? First of all, in most of these cases, not all, it's death with a police certificate. We know how many people died, and it's pretty hard to commit fraud if somebody's dead, because you've got, as a practical matter, you've got the death certificate from the police, you've got the airline manifest, you've got the military records. Now in BP, in the Gulf of Mexico, the oil spill, there we received about 28,000 fraudulent claims. But that was out of 1,250,000 claims. Peanuts. We sent the fraudulent claims to the Justice Department, and they prosecuted, and they put people in jail. But it wasn't a big problem, not with 1,250,000 claims. The problem we had with BP is that there were so many claims. There were claims filed from 50 states. I got 10 claims from North Carolina. I didn't know the oil got to North Carolina. 10 claims, 20 from Alaska, 35 foreign countries. I'm getting claims from China and Norway. Build it and they will come. But most of them were ineligible. We didn't pay them. And fraud, we're always ever vigilant about fraud. But I wouldn't consider fraud. And I don't think what happened in New Orleans and BP, I don't think that it's any different from anywhere else in the country. I don't think Louisiana was particularly a problem for fraud. I don't buy that. I think it would have been the same anyway. And it really wasn't a big issue for us. There were a lot of claims in the aggregate, but considering how many were filed, not a big deal. Couple more? Yes, sir.
Thanks for your remarks. My question is about the non-litigation agreements. And the Catholic Church has set up a variety of victim compensation funds for survivors of clergy sexual abuse. And when those survivors enter those funds, they then sign an agreement they will not sue the church or their abusers. I wonder if you have thoughts about the ethics of that, when litigation might force systemic reforms of large institutions that non-litigation agreements prevent from moving forward.
I'm doing those church cases in 5 states. 40% of all the Catholics in this country fall under the umbrella of the sexual abuse cases that I'm now administering in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Colorado, and California. And you're right. If a victim of church sexual abuse accepts the money that I offer, that person, like BP or 9/11, must sign a release. I will not sue. Do I think that's ethical? I think that's ethical. First of all, it's voluntary. If you don't want the money and you don't want to release the church so that you can pursue litigation designed to deter wrongdoing by the church, by all means do so. Now, in some jurisdictions you can't, because the statute of limitations has run. In other jurisdictions like New York, they've just reopened the statute of limitations to allow those lawsuits. And I think, frankly, those suits will be reopened in most states. That's where the momentum's coming. Now, whether or not it becomes more of an ethical issue because it's the Catholic Church rather than BP or GM or 9/11, well, that's an interesting question. Now, what the church would say is, look, ethically, we have to come to grips with this. And one way we can come to grips with this is by setting up a compensation program. Ask Feinberg, who by definition is not Catholic, to design and administer the programs. Make it voluntary. But as a public policy, the church would say, to your point, if we provide compensation and do not require a release, we will be overwhelmed with litigation that will likely bankrupt the church. And then all victims will get 3 cents on the dollar in bankruptcy. Better to try and head that off by creating a program that will help the victim, will help the church survive, and will lead us to litigate those people who wish to do so. And maybe we've reformed the church going forward, and this won't happen again. I mean, that's the argument. I don't know. I mean, that's an interesting, debatable point. But we're certainly successful ethically in getting compensation to victims. And the fascinating thing, you guys probably know this, the fascinating thing about church victims, when they come to see me, they never come to talk about money. What they want more than anything, Mr. Feinberg, we want validation as to what was done to us. We want an acknowledgement that we are credible and that our stories, which were ignored by the church and put in the bottom drawer, never to be reared again or shown, we want acknowledgement from an independent person. The money's wonderful, but we want you to tell me I'm eligible and it happened. And they really want that. Lives have been destroyed, some of them, so they get that. Yes, sir.
Do you have any critique of to higher education in terms of how we teach ethics? And do you have any insights or set of suggestions how ethical implications of this incredible cause and broader ethical cause could be taught better, both undergrad and grad?
You know, that is a great challenge. I've never been asked that question. I wouldn't know where to begin other than to say this. If I were teaching a course in ethics, I would spend a third of the class studying Socrates, Aristotle, Spinoza, Maimonides, all of them, right up to the present time. And then I would spend the other two-thirds of the class, I think, practical dilemmas, hands-on experience, practical problems raising the type of ethical issues we've talked about today. I think there's no substitute for ethics being taught in a manner that is practical and real world. Start with the philosophers and how they defined ethical dilemmas and how they would solve them. What's the right thing to do in the abstract? But I think it's pretty important to bring to students how it is that ethics and ethical problems enter into day-to-day public policy. And the last third of the class, day-to-day living. Day-to-day living. That's how I would, that's sort of, but of course you took me by surprise, and that's just a 1-minute response.
From Suzanne to teach ethics at Duke soon.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering, what kind of staff do you have backing you up? What are their backgrounds? Do they move from one fund to another? Just how does it work?
That's a good question, an operations question. First of all, my staff, it all depends on the volume of the claims. If it's BP and I have over 1 million claims, I had a staff of about 4,300 people, including 35 claims offices around the Gulf, from Galveston all the way to Mobile Bay. So if the volume is overwhelming, I have lawyers, I have claims appraisers, I have claims adjusters, I have accountants, all working to speedily get people money. If it is a very small matter, or relatively speaking, now in 9/11 I had 7,300 claims and I had about 450 people helping me, contract. If it's a Virginia Tech, we have 32 dead and another 60 injured. We did that in-house, solve those problems. Right now, I'm the only lawyer in my firm. My colleague, who some of you know, Camille Byros, is the world's expert on claims design and claims administration. She's been with me about 40 years. And then as we need staff, we'll go out and get them. We'll hire Price Waterhouse to calculate damages. We'll hire Anchor or Consulting to economically model how many cases there will likely be. We'll hire claims appraisers. We'll hire an anti-fraud unit. And that group will work with us in trying to accelerate and expedite the processing of the claims. So it varies. It can be very expensive, but if you're BP or General Motors, they don't worry about things like that. They want to get it done, and so they are very supportive. And the people I use, by the way, it's interesting. You're right, the implication of your question. I tend to use the same people over and again, except when I need lawyers. I usually use lawyers who volunteer, who write me a letter and remind me that they were in my class at NYU or Columbia or Harvard or Penn, and maybe someday Duke. And they say, I got an A in your class, can I come and work? And that's a big incentive, I'll tell you, they're at the head of the line, so that's how that works. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm wondering actually, you were saying for the 9/11 claims that it was fairly straightforward to put a monetary value on each claim. I'm wondering, at least from the outside, it would seem that the BP claims would be much more complex. How do you place a value on the loss of ecological function, loss of sense of place, loss of livelihoods is even, that's maybe more straightforward. But there's so much complexity in the kind of damages that were done. What were the ethical dilemmas that you faced in trying to place a value on damages in that case?
In BP?
In BP.
Well, the biggest ethical problem in BP was when somebody came to me and said, I lost $100,000 because I couldn't fish. And I said to them, well, okay, what proof do you offer that you lost $100,000? They go, no, we do things with a handshake down here. I'm not going to pay that claim. You got to come forward with some proof. And we make certain assumptions. We've got the statistics and the data about what a fisherman earns on average in the Gulf per day, corroborated by the trip tickets they need to fish as commercial fishermen. We were able to come up with assumptions that we found to be sound. The problem in the Gulf was people didn't have any proof. Mr. Feinberg, I lost $100,000 fishing. I'm a fisherman. I couldn't fish. Pay me. Well, do you have a tax return? No. Do you have a profit and loss statements? No. Do you have a checkbook? Well, he comes forward with, it's in crayon, but at least he comes forward with something. All right. I will send you a check for $100,000. Now, with it, you're going to get a 1099 from the IRS. I am? You're going to send that? Yeah. I waive it. You can't waive a 1099. I've got to send you the 1099. Rip it up. Rip up my check. I don't want the money. I'll see you later. Wait a minute. Because you're going to get a 1099, you don't want $100,000. Rip it up. Never paid taxes in his life, I guess. I mean, I'm not sure it was an ethical dilemma as much as a practical challenge to try and get people money when, a lot of them are scamming the system for years. And I didn't feel comfortable, allowing them to do that, especially when other people who paid their taxes complained about paying people who avoided their tax obligations. So it's tough. It is tough. Yes, ma'am.
You spoke about the 9/11 fund and the sort of finite group of people that you had to compensate, people who had died or had lost a limb. But how did you reserve for people who might have been affected later from debris or inhaling stuff and toxins?
Very good question. What do you do in the 9/11 fund or BP where someone comes to you and says, I was damaged, but I'm afraid that I also have a latent claim, a latent disease that may not, cancer, that may not manifest itself for 10 years from now. What are you going to do for me? And I said to that person, under the law, I'm out of business next year. This is 9/11. I'm out of business next year. I'll give you money now for your current injury. But if you get sick later, nothing I can do, but I won't require a release of your future cancer claim. I'll only get a release for your current injury. And sure enough, Congress stepped in and extended the fund to include people who have claims later on. Now in BP, here's what I did. Mr. Feinberg, I'm an oyster harvester. I own oyster beds in the Gulf. I've suffered $100,000 worth of damage. But what I'm really worried about is how long is it going to take for the oysters to be okay in the Gulf? I know that right now my oyster beds are worthless. But I'm worried about 2, 3, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What are you going to do for me about latent future damage? Here's what we came up with. We hired the foremost marine biologist in the country from Texas A&M, and he did some studies for about a month in the Gulf. And he came back and he said, in my expert opinion, I'm not sure, but in my expert opinion, the oysters should be back plump and healthy within 3 years. Thank you. Mr. Jones, here's what I will do. You take your pick. I solve my ethical dilemma every time by conveying options to the claimant. 1, take the money that you've been damaged now, and every year you can come back with a new claim, and I'm not releasing that claim. You can come back later on, document your additional damage, and I'll pay the additional damage each year that you show additional damage. Or I'll do this. I'll give you your damage now, and based on the marine biologist prediction, I'll also give you right now 3 times your damage. Because the biologist says in 3 years the oysters should be okay. If you're willing to take that risk, I will give you right now this damage you've got plus 3 times. Your choice. Well, everybody took the 3 times. You know, human nature being what it is. Geez, I can get 3 times what I lost. I'm perfectly willing to take the voluntary decision. I'm master of my own fate. I'll take the money now and have 3 times that money. Now, you know, you get criticized, economic compulsion, and I don't buy that for a minute. People are pretty sound in making these decisions, and I think they did the right thing. So those are some of the ways you try and deal with that problem. Any others? By all means, Tom. Wait.
In a few cases, I think you had to deal with an entire firm that was wiped out completely with maybe 40 or 50 employees in there. How did you, did the firm have its own insurance as far as the workability going forward, and it was just the employees of the firm? How did you handle that? I think Kenneth Fitzgerald was wiped out, and there were 50 or 60 people that were just blown away instantly. I just wondered how you distinguished between a firm in operation that was filled with employees that were wiped out in a second.
700 people died at Kenneth Fitzgerald, not 50 or 60. 700 people above the 59th floor never had a chance. Now, what I did with Cantor Fitzgerald, I met with the head of Cantor Fitzgerald. He survived because for the first time in over a year, he was late getting to work. He took his kid to school and was late getting to work, or he would have been dead with his brother. And he said to me, well, as a firm, are you going to pay damages to the firm as an entity? I said, no. That's not part of the statute. You'll have to sue and get insurance or whatever. But I will pay each and every member of your firm who died based on the statute and my obligation to pay. So we paid every one. I believe every one of his people came into the fund voluntarily, and we paid them. The firm, I think, litigated against its insurance carrier, not on my watch, and I believe they settled that as well. The problem we had with the Cantor Fitzgerald people, they all made, $1 million, they're masters of the universe. They all made $1 million or more. They didn't have a will. And between the problem of my exercising my discretion to reduce their awards so that they were closer to the average of what I was paying, coupled with the fact that none of those people at Cantor Fitzgerald had wills, you see. So who gets the money? Big problem. Wives that, one divorced wife with another wife, kids that don't like each other, gay marriage. I mean, it was a real problem. We got through it, but all sorts of ethical dilemmas. After you decide what to pay people, all right, we've got the amount. Now, do we all agree on who's going to get the money? No. So what I did was I said, either you agree, I'm not here forever, either you agree or I'm going to take the money and I'm going to deposit it in the probate court in Manhattan. Go fight it out there. Well, that settled it. That settled it then. Any others? Dan? As far as I know, I never look back. They may be gaining on you, but I think it didn't turn out to be a problem. Yes, sir.
What about the claimant who says, I was so badly traumatized by the tragedy that not only can I not hold a job, I can't even make my kids' school lunch in the morning?
Ineligible. First of all, under the 9/11, that's a good question. Under the 9/11 statute, to be eligible, you had to either die or be physically injured. That worked an injustice on some people who were traumatized, stepping over dead bodies to get out of the World Trade Center. They never were physically injured, but they're traumatized, a la your question. Ineligible, there's nothing I could do. In some cases, like Virginia Tech, where the traumatized student was in the classroom, I had a case in Virginia Tech where a student came to see me shaking. Mr. Feinberg, I was in the classroom when the deranged murderer came in. He blew the head off my girlfriend to my left. He shot to death my boyfriend to my right. Then he put the gun to my head, click, empty. While he was reloading, I jumped out a window and escaped. No physical harm. I don't think I'll ever be able to hold a job again. I witnessed this horror. There, it was sufficiently compartmentalized in terms of scope that we did pay mental injury. But as a general rule, it's very, very difficult because we want to get the money out quickly, and we want it to be objective as can be. And we are very reluctant to delay and get in a debate over whether mental anguish is sufficiently justifiable to compensate. It's a tough question. The Congress, in enacting the 9/11 fund, limited it to physical injuries because it was convinced that if it allowed that type of claim, you'd get people in Omaha watching on CNN that would file a claim. And that's what they were trying to do, I think.
Continuing with Benet, can you just comment on how the First Responders Fund came to be and that whole circus at the end with Jon Stewart, like on MSNBC, we're watching him with that first responder who died 2 weeks later, who was begging for his money so that his family, I mean, it was, and the ethics of that whole thing and how it came to be.
The ethics is a real problem. For the reasons stated earlier about latent claims, Congress decided in its wisdom in 2011, gee, there are a lot of people who are manifesting a disease now, first responders at the World Trade Center. Those people weren't able to get money from Feinberg. They weren't sick yet. We will reauthorize the 9/11 fund to help those people. And that's what happened. And then in 2019, the money ran out. They had authorized about $5 billion. The money ran out not only for the first responders, but they decided to amend the law to allow not only first responders to collect, but anybody living in Lower Manhattan who was exposed to the guck. So it's not just that there wasn't enough money for first responders. First responders only made up 60% of the eligible population. There were 40% of residents of Lower Manhattan who now said, it's because of dust and guck that went through my windows and landed on my windowsill, and now I have cancer. Oh, Congress, you're in for a dime, you're in for a dollar. What are they going to say, no now? So it was a circus, and Stewart, very effective, convinced Congress we owe it to the first responders. I didn't hear a word that we owe it to the residents of Lower Manhattan who also got the money. But secondly, I was waiting for somebody to say, all right, you're right. I'm going to offer an amendment. Let's offer it to the victims of Oklahoma City. Let's offer it to the victims of the 1993 World Trade Center tragedy. Why are we extending just for these people? Nobody made that argument. I was in support of Stewart, mainly because you start down this road and you in 2011 create a law to extend 2001, my fund. In for a dime, you can't now leave people in the lurch. So the law passed, and as you know, it now will fund the program until 2090. I won't be around. And now there's plenty of money. Great. Only in America.